The girl with no title, no last name that mattered, and no place in the spotlight. That's how they spoke of her, Victoria Hale, not aloud of course, but in whispers that carried louder than any trumpet. It was tradition, only descendants of royal lineages were chosen to perform at the Queen's annual shooting ceremony. Victoria, despite her flawless training record, was placed on the reserve list. No applause, no acknowledgement, just a name scribbled at the bottom. And yet, she stayed. Her posture straight, her hands calmly polishing a rifle that wasn't even hers. Not to be seen, not to protest, just to be there. Across the field, Margot Everly's laughter cracked through the afternoon air. Let's hope the Queen arrives before the janitor tries her luck on stage. She sneered, her manicured finger pointing squarely at Victoria. Victoria didn't flinch. She looked up, and for a second, only a second, her eyes locked with Margot's. And in that silence, something shifted. Because while the others rehearsed their smiles for the cameras, Victoria was rehearsing something else entirely. The parade grounds of the Royal Naval Academy had never looked more immaculate. Manicured hedges framed the shooting field, and at the far end, beneath the golden crest of the monarchy, the royal viewing stand loomed like a temple. Flags bearing centuries-old insignias flapped with measured dignity. The day was not just ceremonial, it was curated, designed to honor not only talent, but heritage. Victoria. Hale knew this. Everyone did, but most accepted it. She simply observed it. Cadets gathered in precise formation, each uniform crisp, each boot polished, each family name steeped in generations of service. Victoria's uniform was clean, but the cut was plainer. Her boots bore the wear of real use. A faded navy ribbon held back her hair, not adorned but practical. She stood apart, not slouching, not shrinking, simply grounded. The murmur of judgment always arrived before the official commentary. She's the scholarship cadet, right? No. Family crest. Just skill. Pity that. Then came the voice that never whispered, Margot Everly. Is it too late to revoke her invite? Or has the Academy opened its doors to laundresses? Now Margot's words weren't meant for subtlety. They were weapons spoken loud, sharp public. A ripple of laughter followed. Not all found it funny, but enough did. And that was enough. Victoria didn't respond. She adjusted the strap of her rifle case. Her fingers grazed the brass buckle, a small detail she had polished the night before. Across the grounds, names were announced: Ashford, DeVere, Langford, Pembroke. Each greeted with applause, each a legacy. Victoria's name remained unsaid. She didn't look disappointed. She didn't even look expectant. Her gaze traced the motion of the wind flags gathering data no one else cared about. She noted the sun's angle, the slope of the sand beneath the targets, and the slight delay between each ceremonial shot. While others posed for cameras, Victoria studied conditions. Her moment was not guaranteed. It wasn't even promised. But if it came, she'd be ready. A group of young cadets leaned against the railing, all adorned in house colors. Their laughter was light, but their eyes carried the weight of entitlement. Heard she outscored Margot's daughter in the prelims. Guess they needed a reminder of who's welcome here. One of them made a shooting gesture, smirking. Tradition never misses. Victoria caught the motion in her periphery. She didn't react. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a piece of cloth worn soft with age. She cleaned the trigger of her rifle with the care of someone handling more than steel. She wasn't performing. She was honoring something they didn't understand. Then as the breeze shifted, she looked up, toward the royal platform, toward a single figure sitting still amid the splendor, Queen Eleanor VI's. Their eyes didn't meet, but in that moment, something passed through the air, intangible, unseen, yet unmistakable. And while the cadets stood wrapped in medals and names, Victoria stood in silence, wrapped in memory, grit, and something unshakable. They thought they'd shut her out, but fortresses aren't broken by noise. They're undone by stillness, by the one person who waits at the door and never knocks. The sun was nearly at its zenith when the misstep occurred, not just in body, but in expectation. Cadet Evelyn Everly was the epitome of ceremony, flawless braid, spotless cuffs, and a practiced air of elegance passed down like inheritance. Her name had echoed through the courtyard just moments earlier, followed by applause that sounded more like approval of her lineage than her skill. Victoria Hale, standing among the reserves, watched with detached stillness. She wasn't hoping for a chance. She wasn't even watching Evelyn. She was watching the wind. Then it happened. As Evelyn stepped onto the polished stone of the shooting platform, her heel skidded ever so slightly on the gleam. It was minor, just a shift, a tremble in posture, but enough to tilt the balance, enough to make a room full of expectation freeze. Gasps spread like birds startled into flight. Officials moved quickly, ushering Evelyn off with gentle urgency. She tried to recover, but the crimson in her cheeks betrayed the mortification in her heart. And in that strange silence, with everyone waiting for protocol to resume, a voice sliced the air cleanly. "Well then, brace yourselves. Looks like the scholarship girl finally gets her 5 seconds of pity." It was Margot Everly standing in full view, not an ounce of subtlety in her spine. She waved a gloved hand vaguely toward Victoria. "Maybe next year we'll let the kitchen staff have a go." Scattered laughter, some uncertain, some too eager. Victoria remained where she was, rifle slung over one shoulder, eyes calm and distant. She said nothing. "You know, I heard she got here by beating Evelyn's score. Can you believe that? Who was keeping score, blindfolded mice. Let's not pretend she belongs here. This is a tradition, not a talent show for orphans." Now, more heads were turning, not just toward Margot, but toward Victoria, as if waiting to see her collapse or lash out. But Victoria didn't move. She only adjusted the rifle strap slightly and turned her head slowly toward the ceremonial platform. Margot stepped forward, pointing. "Now, tell me, do you know how to bow properly, Miss Hale? Or will you embarrass us all with that peasant posture?" Still silence. They let you polish the rifles. That's where you belong. Don't confuse proximity with privilege. The crowd wasn't laughing now. Not exactly. It was more uncomfortable, now murkier. A few looked down. Some pretended not to hear, but no one interrupted. That's how these moments worked. Designed to humiliate until the target shattered, except Victoria didn't. She blinked once, then slowly reached into her pocket and removed a soft piece of cloth. Deliberately, she began polishing the metal edge of her rifle, eyes on her hands. Not on the audience, not on Margot. Margot scoffed. "So, that's it then. No tears, no speech, just another mute display of working-class stoicism." But her laughter faltered, because in that stillness, something shifted. A royal aide leaned toward one of the officers on the platform. A few quiet words, a glance in Victoria's direction, a single nod. Then the announcer's voice rose again, this time with an edge of surprise. "By royal approval, Reserve Cadet Victoria Hale, step forward." It took a second for the words to settle. Then murmurs. People looked, some stood. Margot's face drained of color. Victoria didn't smile, didn't blink. She simply took a breath and walked forward each step. Steady her shoulders, neither bowed nor inflated. She moved like she belonged there, not because she had been allowed, but because she had already arrived. And while some waited for a breakdown, a protest, or even gratitude, she gave them none of it. No dramatics, no apology, just silence. The kind of silence that doesn't retreat, the kind that builds. And when she stood at the center of the arena, rifle in hand, eyes forward, something subtle yet seismic began to shift in the air. Not loud, not obvious, but undeniable, and it was only the beginning. The shooting platform was wide and exposed, a space designed not only for performance, but for spectacle. Under the full gaze of hundreds, with the royal standard fluttering above Victoria, Hale took her first step forward. Her boots echoed with a sound that was somehow both quiet and commanding. She didn't walk quickly, nor did she slow to dramatize the moment. Her pace was deliberate, like someone who knew every grain of stone beneath her from the high royal pavilion. Queen. Eleanor V sat motionless. Her gloved hands rested on her lap. Her chin tilted just slightly as she watched. One might assume she was simply being polite, but her gaze was sharpened, analytical, as if measuring not posture, but essence. Victoria stopped at the center. She didn't glance at the audience. She didn't scan the field. She just stood still. Behind her silence expanded, even the mocking whispers that once curled around her name had faded. The crowd, once so sure of its roles, who to clap for who to sneer at, now found itself uncertain. Victoria didn't demand attention, but she had it. A breeze tugged at the edge of her sleeve. The flags above shifted slightly. Her eyes flicked to them, not out of nervousness, but calculation. She was reading the air like a map. She hadn't lifted her rifle yet, but somehow it felt like the countdown had begun. Inside her chest, her breath deepened, not ragged, not anxious, but methodical. She was syncing with something invisible, something greater than the ritual around her, like tuning her heartbeat to a forgotten song. Then her gaze shifted, past the target, beyond the range. To a rusted naval bell at the tree line, it hung crookedly, the clapper missing, no longer in use. Forgotten by most, not by her. That bell had once marked the hour her father would return from his night shift. She had memorized its tone, its pitch. Its silence now was louder than any anthem. Her father had served this academy, had taught her the weight of discipline, the quiet strength of preparation. He never needed applause, just precision. Victoria hadn't come here to be seen. She had come to remember, and in remembering she became something more. She closed her eyes. She was 7 again, in a windswept field, holding a rifle twice too large for her arms. Her father's hands guiding hers, his voice quiet, warm. Aim with your mind, not your anger. She opened her eyes. There was no anger in them, only clarity. She adjusted her stance, one foot slightly forward. Weight balanced. Still she didn't fire, because this moment wasn't about the shot. It was about the weight, the discipline to delay gratification, the refusal to rush just because others wanted closure. Every second Victoria held back, the tension in the courtyard grew. Why doesn't she shoot someone? Whispered again. But others shushed them, because they too were beginning to feel it. The shift from overlooked to undeniable, from tolerated to revered. Margot Everly, seated near the front, leaned forward, lips tight, jaw clenched, her hands twitched in her lap. She wanted Victoria to falter. She needed her to crack. But Victoria's silence wasn't born of fear. It was forged from years of restraint, of watching from the sidelines, of being told to wait her turn, only to discover that her turn was never going to be handed to her. So now she would take it. On her terms, she reached into her coat pocket again, not to draw attention, but to ground herself. Inside was a tiny coin, Navy issue tarnished around the edges. Her father had given it to her before his final deployment. For luck, he'd said, though, he never believed in it. He believed in readiness. She rubbed it between her fingers once, then returned it to her pocket. A small ritual, a silent armor. Then came a sound, soft, almost imperceptible, metal against stone. A coin somewhere in the crowd had slipped from a spectator's fingers. The kind of moment no one noticed unless they were listening for it. Victoria heard it, and only then did she move. A shift of weight, a breath, drawn deep, a step to the firing line. Her fingers wrapped the rifle with reverence, not tension. She raised the weapon not with bravado, but with calm, and yet still she didn't shoot. Not yet, because power wasn't in the noise, it was in the timing. When Victoria finally took her place at the firing line, the entire arena seemed to hold its breath. She didn't glance left or right, didn't search for approval. She simply looked ahead, and that was enough. There was no fire in her face, no expression of vengeance, just focus, unshakable, precise. She lowered her body gently, adjusted her stance, and cradled the rifle like it was an extension of her own breath. Then, with the same stillness that had haunted the courtyard, minutes before, she pulled the trigger. First shot. A sharp crack rang through the air. The bullet struck the exact center of the bullseye so cleanly it nearly vanished inside the mark. No one clapped. They couldn't. It was the kind of silence that begged for another sound, any sound to break the pressure, but the silence lingered. Second shot, slightly below the first, embedding itself in the exact center of the Academy's crest, engraved into the lower quadrant of the target, a place no one ever aimed at, a place no one even acknowledged. Whispers rose like wind. She did that on purpose. How did she see that Margot Everly, still seated, leaned in with visible tension? The woman who had mocked and sneered now sat quiet, lips tight, knuckles whitening on the armrest. Victoria didn't look at her. Not once. Third shot. This time off-center, but by design. The bullet hit a hair-thin silver ring at the edge of the target, used only during sight calibration. Invisible to most from the stands. But not to Victoria. A few spectators gasped. Someone in the back of the stands dropped a glass. Still no celebration. Because what they were watching wasn't performance, it was revelation. Victoria was not here to be good, she wasn't here to be better. She was here to rewrite what it meant to belong. Fourth shot. She adjusted mid-stance not out of hesitation, but adaptation. The bullet curved ever so slightly to compensate for the shifting wind. It struck true barely a centimeter above a structural flaw in the target board that most had never noticed. And yet, she had. The audience was now leaning in. Even the guards by the perimeter stood straighter. Fifth shot, clean, smooth. Perfect. She didn't blink between movements. She didn't breathe heavy. Her body was a vessel of precision, and every action whispered, "I have trained for this moment my entire life." You just didn't see it coming. Then she paused. Not because of nerves, because of intent. Sixth shot. This was the one that mattered, the one no one expected. She inhaled deeply, and for the first time her eyes flickered toward the royal pavilion. Not directly at Queen Eleanor, but just to the left, where her father used to stand during drills long before fate took him. Then she aimed lower, much lower. The sixth bullet struck something not even the judges anticipated. A small bronze insignia embedded into the base of the target stand a symbolic artifact, untouched for decades. No one had ever aimed for it, no one thought to. But Victoria saw it, and she honored it. The crack of that sixth shot wasn't the loudest, but it was the one that rang longest. The courtyard fell into an even deeper silence, not out of confusion, but out of realization. She knew someone whispered. She saw it before any of us. She aimed for what mattered. Victoria lowered her rifle. No bow, no nod. She didn't need to prove humility because she hadn't come for recognition. She came to reclaim something older than approval, and then heels on marble. A slow, deliberate rhythm. Queen Eleanor V was rising. The crowd turned, some stood, others followed in silence. But Victoria didn't flinch, because this was not the end of a performance. It was the beginning of a reckoning. When Queen Eleanor Viviv stepped forward, the entire courtyard shifted. Not a single trumpet played, and yet the silence felt ceremonial. The rustle of her robe brushing against the polished marble echoed louder than applause. Victoria didn't turn. She remained at ease, rifle lowered, gaze steady. And then without a word, the Queen raised her hand. A royal aide stepped forward, carrying a small velvet-lined box. Inside, it lay a pin, the insignia of tactical distinction. A decoration that hadn't been awarded in over 15 years, and never once to a cadet on reserve. Murmurs swept the stands. That's not in protocol. They never give that to students. But the Queen took it and crossed the remaining steps to Victoria herself. In a single precise motion, she fastened the insignia to Victoria's jacket. "Not all who carry legacy wear it on their sleeves," she said. Voice low, but clear. "Today you reminded us what legacy is supposed to look like." A beat of silence. Then slowly the crowd rose, not all at once, but wave-like. People who minutes ago didn't see her now stood in acknowledgement. Applause followed, but not the thunderous kind of spectacle applause. This was something quieter. Heavier respect rediscovered. And that was when the unraveling began. Margot Everly didn't rise. She remained seated, but her posture shifted too straight, too still. Her daughter Evelyn returned from the infirmary just in time to see Victoria receiving the honor that Margot had once dreamed of for herself, vicariously through her child. Evelyn's eyes dropped, not in shame, but in clarity. Her gaze drifted from Victoria to her mother, and something between them cracked elsewhere. Other voices began to echo what had once been whispers. "Didn't Victoria top the qualifying scores this year? I heard she trained herself before ever being accepted. Her father served on the Vanguard fleet, didn't he?" Suddenly, the very people who had scoffed at her presence were now scrambling to reframe their narrative. But Victoria didn't speak. She simply stepped down from the dais, every movement still composed as if the moment belonged to everyone but her. It was the silence that punished. It was their own awkwardness in her presence that cut deepest. Margot, cornered by eyes she used to command, stood at last, but too late. A journalist approached her camera. "Ready, Mrs. Everly. Would you like to comment on Cadet Hale's performance?" Margot's lips parted, but nothing came out, because there were no words sharp enough to defend her pride, now dulled by precision. Elsewhere, instructors nodded, some quietly, murmuring to each other. The commandant of the academy turned to his deputy and said, "We were blind. She should have been on the primary roster from the beginning." Victoria heard none of this. She was already halfway across the courtyard, heading toward the west gate, away from the noise, away from the ceremony, away from the need for validation. But not before one last thing happened. As she passed the statue of Admiral Kingsley, the founder of the Academy, she paused. There beside it stood Evelyn Everly. This time, there was no entourage, no velvet gloves, no smug tilt of the chin, just a girl who had seen something truer than privilege. Evelyn nodded, and for the first time Victoria nodded back. It wasn't forgiveness, it was acknowledgement, not of equals, but of understanding. And then without another glance, Victoria continued walking toward the quiet where real power lives. Victoria didn't stay for the closing ceremony. As the crowd clapped and curtsied, she was already walking beneath the shadow of the Academy's stone arches. Her rifle tucked away her steps, lighter than when she arrived. She didn't need a podium. She had peace. She didn't chase applause. She had clarity. She didn't seek revenge. She had something better. A life built not on proving others wrong, but on proving herself right. No title, no surname, no curated legacy. Just precision, just presence, just purpose. And that was enough. As the camera faded, we ask you, what would your quiet victory look like? If this story moved, you don't just scroll past. Tell us what moment in your life felt like. Victoria's sixth shot. Like, if you felt the shift, subscribe, because the next story might just be the one that sets you free. And share this with someone who's quietly building their own legend. You definitely don't want to miss what's coming next.